M5D UFO Files. Unraveling the UFO Files. Revelations that change everything.
You are now listening to M5D UFO Files, Unraveling the Secrets of Aerial Phenomena.
I'm Drea Evelyn Reed.
And I'm Agent Fox Mulder. Today, we're cracking open a file that's been sealed shut for over 50 years. A file on the moon that, well, it points to a cosmic cover-up of unbelievable proportions. So, let's get into it.
You know, Evelyn, it all kicks off with a sound. A really strange sound. After NASA intentionally smashed a multi-ton lunar module right into the moon's surface, one of their top scientists, Maurice Ewing, said it rang as though one had struck a bell. But honestly, the sound itself wasn't the impossible part. It's what happened next that defies all explanation.
Exactly, Fox. That bell-like ringing, it's just the first piece of a much, much larger puzzle. In this first part of our investigation, we're going to look at some of the most baffling scientific anomalies from the Apollo missions. These are events that the official reports just really struggle to explain away.
So, let's start with a weird glow. Just a few hours before the Eagle landed, the Apollo 11 crew reported this mysterious illumination coming from inside the Aristarchus crater. NASA's official line was pretty simple: solar glint from some reflective dust. But solar glint? Seriously? The real kicker is that a lunar scientist pointed out that the crater was in total darkness. It was on the night side of the moon. He even said himself it had to be something else, something they were hiding.
And believe me, it gets so much stranger. When the Apollo 10 astronauts were on the far side of the moon, completely cut off from Earth, they heard something that they described in their own transcripts as strange, otherworldly music for almost an hour. Read, a bizarre whistling sound. Now think about it, with no radio signals from Earth and no magnetic field, where did it come from? Of course, they buried those tapes for 40 years. Which brings us right back to that bell. So after the Apollo 12 impact, the seismic sensors they'd placed started registering the vibrations. Here on Earth, an impact like that would cause tremors for, maybe a minute or two? But the moon, it vibrated continuously for 25 solid minutes.
And that one single data point gave birth to an absolutely explosive theory, the hollow moon theory. A solid celestial body just doesn't ring like a bell for a half an hour. It can't. So if the moon is hollow, that means it has to be artificial. And if it's artificial, Evelyn, there's only one question that matters: who built it?
And that question, who built it, it completely shifts our entire investigation. We're not just asking what happened anymore. Now we're asking, what are they hiding? And for that, we have to turn to direct testimony from insiders who claim this cover-up is very, very real.
And here it is, the confession. This is a direct quote from a U.S. airman stationed at a top-secret NSA facility back in the 1960s. His whole job was to process photos from the Lunar Orbiter program, mapping out landing sites for Apollo. One day, he just turns to a colleague and says, "We've discovered a base on the backside of the moon."
And his descriptions weren't vague, not at all. The airman detailed these massive structures. Some of them were up to half a mile in size. He saw spherical buildings, huge T-shaped structures that looked like cooling towers, and he even noted that the material wasn't metallic. It looked more like fabricated stone, nothing natural about it. So how in the world do you keep something that enormous a secret? Well, you hire people like Donna Hare. She was a contractor at a NASA photo lab, and she later testified that there was an official, systematic protocol in place. Her exact words, "We always have to airbrush them out before we sell them to the public." This wasn't some accident, Reed. This was policy.
And a policy like that, it requires an absolutely incredible system to enforce it. To really get our heads around the scale of this alleged cover-up, we have to understand the architecture of secrecy that was built to make sure that what happens in space stays in space.
The whole system is built on one simple principle: compartmentalization. You take sensitive work and you divide it into these tiny, isolated pieces. A photo technician only develops the film. They are explicitly forbidden from ever discussing what's on it. Information is only given out on a strict need-to-know basis. That way, you ensure no single person ever sees the full picture.
And who gets to see what is controlled by a clearance hierarchy that's just a labyrinth? You might start at top secret. If you're really lucky, after years you might get top secret crypto. But above that,
There are levels so secret they're just called above top secret. It's a total black box designed so that nobody can ever talk.
And if that system of secrecy fails, well, the enforcement is brutal. We have testimony of guards being forced to physically burn UFO photographs. One guard who dared to peek at a picture was knocked unconscious with the butt of a gun. Astronauts were flat out told they'd lose their pensions if they talked. This wasn't a friendly suggestion. It was an enforcement of absolute, total silence.
Which brings us to the biggest question of all. Why? Why would you go to such desperate, violent, multi-generational lengths to hide something? The potential answer? Well, it takes us from a government conspiracy to something far older, and maybe, just maybe, not of this world at all.
To even try to find an answer, we have to look to these ancient Gnostic texts that were suppressed for centuries. They talk about a non-physical, parasitic intelligence they called the archons. The word itself literally means rulers or hidden rulers. They described them as a kind of cosmic error, an inorganic species that managed to infiltrate our reality.
And get this, Evelyn, the Gnostics actually described the archons as manifesting in two physical forms. Does any of this sound a little familiar to you? One form was reptilian, the other resembled a gray, undeveloped fetus with big, black, unblinking eyes. This is ancient scripture, and it's describing the two most common alien archetypes in modern ufology.
The synchronicities are they're stunning. Those ancient Gnostic texts, the Nag Hammadi scriptures, they were buried in a jar in the Egyptian desert for over 1,500 years. And the year they were finally unearthed? 1947. The exact same year as the Roswell UFO crash. Coincidence? Or maybe it was a cosmic message finally being delivered when we needed it most.
If you ask the Gnostics, it's no coincidence at all. They'd say it's evidence of an ancient ongoing conflict. A war where the ultimate prize isn't land or gold or resources, but something far more valuable, human consciousness itself.
And their primary weapon in this war? Deception. The texts claim the archons have this ability to create what they call phantasia, a fake reality, a simulation so convincing that we, the targets, believe it's completely real.
But why? What's the motive here? The Gnostics believe the archons are basically parasites, that they infused humanity with a counterfeit spirit, which is like a mental virus designed to generate negative emotions. Our rage, our sorrow, our fear, that is their food. Our suffering is literally their sustenance.
It's an absolutely mind-bending concept, I know. But if it's true, it leaves all of us with the most profound and terrifying question of all. If this is a fake reality, then what is truly real?
M5D, UFO Files. Real-life mysteries discussed by those who dare to question. The truth is out there, and we seek it.
Subscribe now and dive deep into the unexplained with us at M5D UFO Files. Go on, like, share, and join the truth seekers. And please, rate and review us. It really does help other seekers find our content. Until next time.
You are now listening to M5D UFO Files, unraveling the secrets of aerial phenomena. Subscribe now and dive deep into the unexplained with M5D UFO Files. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're doing a deep dive that goes way beyond the shiny official story of the space race. We're cracking open the classified files, looking at some really weird science, and pointing it all straight at the moon.
Yes, and we have a fascinating collection of sources today. It really runs the gamut. We've got hard physical data, seismic readings that basically baffled every geologist back then.
Right.
We have direct insider testimony, people with high clearances talking about massive non-human bases up there.
Bases on the moon?
And then we dive into something even deeper, ancient suppressed texts that might actually provide a framework for why all this was kept secret, a kind of cosmic control system.
So our mission today is pretty big. We want to unpack the evidence that suggests the moon. Well, maybe it isn't natural. And then figure out if all the government secrecy around it points to something much bigger, like a hidden conflict, maybe even a war for consciousness itself.
It's definitely not just about little green men, as you say. This gets into the nature of reality.
Exactly. So let's just jump right in, part one. The stuff NASA found that they just couldn't explain away. The physical anomalies. Okay, Apollo gave us those iconic photos, one small step, all that. But it also sent back data that, honestly, it just broke the existing scientific models. Let's start back in July '69. hours before the Eagle actually landed.
Right, the world's watching the lander, but meanwhile, astronomers, specifically in Germany, they report seeing something really odd, a strange light.
In the shadows, right. This is the transient lunar phenomena, the TLP.
Exactly, and this wasn't just some amateur sighting. These were professional astronomers, and they saw a significant unexplained light coming from the Aristarchus crater. Now, Aristarchus is known to be bright, but the timing here is key.
In crucial context, Mission Control was concerned enough to actually radio up to the Apollo 11 crew. They asked them to look at it.
They did, and the astronauts confirmed it. They reported seeing a, quote, glow in that crater, said it was considerably more illuminated than the area around it.
But they specifically noted no color involved. So not like a chemical flare or something easily explained.
Precisely, and NASA's immediate official explanation.
Let me guess. Swamp gas. No, wait. Wrong planet.
Huh, close. They went with solar glint. Their line was the crater glistens because it contains reflective dust. Maybe the angle of the sun just hit it right. You know, the standard playbook for optical anomalies.
But here's where it falls apart, right?
Yeah.
This is why the source material treats this as such a big deal. A lunar scientist, Peter Schultz, pointed out the obvious contradiction.
Yes, Schultz highlighted the critical point. When Apollo 11 flew over Aristarchus crater, it was in the nighttime.
Nighttime, so no sun.
No sun. You can't have solar glint without the sun. It's basic physics. Schultz argued quite forcefully that the light can't be a glint off the sun and therefore had to be something else.
It had to be an internal light source or something generated on the moon. The official explanation wasn't just weak, it was impossible given the facts.
And think about the institutional reaction. The sources are clear. Researching TLPs became terribly controversial. People allegedly got fired for trying to investigate these lights seriously.
Which only makes it seem more suspicious, doesn't it? Why fire someone for looking at inconvenient data unless that data completely undermines the official story you're trying to sell?
It's a classic suppression tactic. If you silence the people who saw something real, it reinforces the idea that they were probably right. That strange glow was just the beginning, though. The seismic data was arguably even weirder.
Ah, yes, the main event. If the glow is a whisper, the Apollo 12 seismic readings were a shout. The infamous 25-minute vibration, the whole hollow moon idea really starts here.
It does. This was a planned experiment. Apollo 12 astronauts set up a very sensitive seismometer on the lunar surface. Then, Mission Control deliberately crashed the used lunar module ascent stage, basically space junk at that point, back into the moon.
And it hit hard. Right?
Oh yeah, nearly 3,800 miles per hour. A significant controlled impact designed to see how the seismic waves traveled through the moon, like tapping it to see what it's made of.
On Earth, if you do that, the vibrations die down pretty quickly. Our planet's interior, the mantle, the core, it's dense, there's water, molten rock. It acts like a shock absorber.
Exactly. Seismic waves get dampened fast, usually within minutes, even from big earthquakes. But the moon? The moon didn't play by those rules.
What happened?
The impact astonished NASA scientists. The signal didn't just register and fade, it built up, it traveled around the moon, and it kept going. The moon vibrated for 25 minutes.
25 minutes, that's not rock behavior.
No. Maurice Ewing, a lead scientist on the project, famously said it continued as though one had struck a bell, a giant cosmic bell.
Okay, a bell rings because it's hollow, or at least has a specific resonant structure. Solid rock doesn't ring like that. So what was NASA's official explanation for the 25-minute bell concert?
They had to scramble. The official theory was that the moon's crust has very low levels of water compared to Earth. Without water acting like Earth's shock absorbers, they argued, the seismic signals just don't dissipate quickly, they keep bouncing around inside.
That sounds thin. Like saying a bell rings because it's not wet enough?
It is thin. It describes why it might vibrate longer than Earth, maybe, but it doesn't really explain the sustained bell-like resonance. It feels like trying to force a square peg into a round hole of conventional geology.
Which leads directly to the alternative theory, the one they didn't want to touch. The outside-the-box idea that the observation practically screams the moon is hollow.
And that's the logical leap. If it is hollow, then it's not a naturally occurring phenomenon. Standard planetary science says a body that large needs a dense core to form naturally. If it doesn't have one and it rings like a gong,
then it has to be artificial.
That's the implication. Somebody built it, which is, a staggering conclusion to draw from a seismograph reading.
Absolutely staggering. Okay, so we've got weird lights in the dark. We've got a moon ringing like a bell. Let's move to the auditory side. The Apollo 10 incident. The infamous Outer space music.
Yes, this was during the Apollo 10 mission, the dress rehearsal before Apollo 11. They were orbiting the far side of the moon.
The dark side. Completely out of radio contact with Earth for about an hour. Total radio silence.
Supposedly total silence. But during that blackout period, the astronauts reported hearing this bizarre, unidentified radio signal. They described it themselves as strange, otherworldly music, like a whistling or whooshing sound.
And we know they were freaked out by it because the transcript's right.
Yeah.
One astronaut saying something like, boy, that was weird music, and another asking, shall we tell them about it? They knew it was anomalous.
Definitely. And crucially, the conditions for normal radio interference just weren't there. They were shielded from Earth signals by the entire moon. The moon itself has basically no atmosphere and no significant magnetic field to create natural space sounds like you get near Earth. So where was this music coming from?
Good question. And what did NASA do when they heard the tapes?
Predictably, they transcribed the conversations, then immediately classified everything. The tapes were buried in the archives.
For how long?
Almost 4 decades. They weren't released until 2008. That's a long time to sit on some radio interference.
And the astronauts themselves. They were pressured to stay quiet, weren't they?
Massively pressured. The sources say they were absolutely petrified of being grounded. If NASA questioned their psychological stability after hearing space music, their careers were over. Silence was enforced.
It took years for them to speak more freely. Didn't Al Worden, another Apollo astronaut, later dismiss the interference theory?
He did. Worden argued, very logically, logic tells me that if there was something recorded on there, then there was something there. You don't classify and bury tapes of static for 40 years. You do it because the signal was real, organized, and unexplainable by conventional means. It suggested someone or something else was operating near the moon.
Okay, so the physical and auditory data is deeply weird and consistently suppressed. Now let's move into the claims of actual structures and the really intense secrecy surrounding them. This is where we shift from strange readings to concrete allegations of buildings, of installations on the moon, and the almost, well, violent methods used to keep it quiet.
Yeah.
We have specific insider testimony.
Yes, this account comes from a former U.S. Air Force sergeant. He had a top secret crypto security clearance, so we're talking very high level access. He was working at an NSA facility involved with the Lunar Orbiter program.
The program that was mapping the moon to find safe landing spots for Apollo 11, right?
Exactly, high resolution photography. This sergeant was fixing some equipment when an airman who was visibly upset, apparently breaking under the pressure of compartmentalization, just blurted it out.
Blurted out what?
He told the sergeant, quote, "We've discovered a base on the backside of the moon."
A base. Not just a ship or debris. A base.
A base. And based on the photographic mosaics they were assembling from these 35mm film strips, the structures weren't small, they were massive, some up to half a mile in size.
Half a mile. And what do they look like? Natural formations?
No, definitely not. The description was fabricated stone, implying complex construction, not just metal wreckage. The airman described a whole cluster of structures spread across the landscape.
Like what kind of structures?
Get this. Very tall, thin structures like towers, spherical and domed buildings, which you'd expect maybe for habitat or environmental control, and even things that look like industrial structures on Earth, like cooling towers and Quonset huts.
That sounds like a fully operational complex, not just a crash saucer.
It sounds like infrastructure. And you have to remember the quality of reconnaissance imagery back then, the NRO, the NSA. They could supposedly read a license plate from orbit even then.
So, mistaking a half-mile-long structure for a rock, impossible.
Highly improbable, bordering on impossible. They would have known exactly what they were looking at. It wasn't ambiguous.
And this sergeant's account, did it stand alone, or was there corroboration?
Well, for him personally, his conviction was strengthened years later when he read Colonel Philip Corso's book, The Day After Roswell. Corso, based on his own alleged access to classified files from his time in Army R&D, also claimed there was a base on the backside of the moon.
So the idea was circulating in different parts of the intelligence community, potentially.
It suggests it wasn't just one person seeing one strange photo. It points towards a recognized, if highly classified, reality. Which then begs the question, how did they keep the photos hidden?
Right. If they had pictures, photographic proof.
Yeah.
How do you stop that leaking? Which brings us to the airbrushing protocol.
This testimony comes from Donna Hare, who worked as a contractor in a NASA photo lab. She describes seeing an aerial mosaic image. In it, there was a clear, round, white dot, sharp edges.
Could have been an emulsion flaw, a speck on the negative.
That's what you might think. But her colleague pointed out something crucial. The dot was casting a distinct, round shadow on the ground, and the shadow matched the angle of the sun in the photo.
Meaning it was a real three-dimensional object above the lunar surface, a UFO.
Exactly, not a photo defect. And her colleague's response wasn't scientific curiosity, it was procedure.
What procedure?
He confirmed there was a formal protocol in place for getting rid of UFO pictures, specifically using airbrushing techniques to physically remove the object from the negative before we sell them to the public.
So they weren't just not releasing UFO photos, they were actively altering the official photographic record to erase them, creating a fake reality for public consumption.
Deliberate, systematic censorship baked into the workflow, and the enforcement of this silence, according to other accounts, was brutal.
How brutal.
We have corroborating stories. Security guards at certain facilities reportedly being forced to burn large quantities of UFO pictures under the watch of armed soldiers.
Forced to burn evidence.
And it gets worse. One account details a guard who got curious. He tried to sneak a peek at one of the photos being destroyed. Apparently, it showed a UFO on the ground.
What happened to him?
He was knocked unconscious with a gun butt, instantly. Woke up later, permanent scar. The message was crystal clear. Do not look, do not question, do not talk.
That's extreme violence to protect pictures. It suggests the content of those pictures was absolutely world-shattering.
And this intimidation went right to the top. Even the astronauts, the guys who actually went there, if they saw something anomalous, apparently the code word was Santa Claus.
Santa Claus.
Seriously? Apparently. If they reported seeing Santa Claus, they were met with threats, forced to sign non-disclosure agreements. Their careers, their pensions, everything was on the line, all justified under the guise of national security.
So the heroes we celebrated were effectively silenced, maybe terrified witnesses.
It paints a very different picture of the Apollo era, doesn't it? Which makes the next piece even more intriguing. The U.S. military's own plan for a moon base, Project Horizon.
All right, this wasn't some sci-fi fantasy. This was a real, detailed military plan from 1959.
A 118-page classified report from the U.S. Army, pushed by General Arthur Trudeau. It laid out the plan to build a permanent, staffed military fortress on the moon.
And they weren't messing around. How important did they consider this?
The report itself stated it was as much of a priority as the Manhattan Project was during World War II. Think about that. Building the A-bomb level priority.
Wow. So what was the goal? Science? Exploration?
Not primarily. It was pure Cold War strategy. They were terrified the Soviets would get to the moon first and build missile silos. The fear was Moscow could rain missiles down on the United States from the moon.
The ultimate high ground.
Exactly. So the U.S. Army's plan was, must fortify the moon first, build a base, staff it with 21 personnel initially, engineers, medics, soldiers powered by nuclear reactors.
And the ultimate purpose of this fortress.
The report is chillingly explicit. Gain the strategic advantage to bombard our enemies on Earth with nuclear weapons from the moon, a lunar nuclear launch platform.
That's terrifying. And when did they plan to have this operational?
The timeline was incredibly ambitious. General Trudeau wanted it up and running by 1966. They had worked out the logistics, 62 launches of the Saturn VII rocket, prefab modules, the whole 9 yards. It was a serious, funded proposal.
But it never happened. 1966 came and went. Apollo happened later. Project Horizon was officially shelved.
Correct. It just vanished from official planning.
So here's the million-dollar question. Why? Why would the most powerful military on Earth in the middle of a desperate Cold War abandon a project they themselves called as vital as the Manhattan Project, a project giving them absolute military supremacy?
It doesn't make conventional strategic sense. They had the technology, or were rapidly developing it. They had the motivation. Why stop?
Unless,
as many researchers looking at this material suggest, they discovered something during their preliminary reconnaissance, maybe related to those photos we discussed, that made them realize
someone else was already there.
Someone else was already there. And perhaps that someone else had technology far superior to anything the US or the Soviets could muster, forcing them to quietly abandon the plan rather than risk a confrontation they couldn't win.
If a technologically superior presence forced the US military to scrap its ultimate strategic weapon, well, that completely reframes everything. Who are they? What do they want? And that leads us straight into the really deep end, the metaphysical claims.
Exactly. The physical cover-up might just be the surface layer of something far older and stranger.
Okay, so we've established the moon seems physically weird, and there's evidence of bases and a massive cover-up involving airbrushed photos and silenced astronauts. Now we pivot to perhaps the most challenging part. The why. Why all the secrecy? Some sources connect this to ancient, suppressed wisdom.
Yes, specifically the Gnostic texts, like those found at Nag Hammadi in Egypt. And the timing is uncanny, isn't it? These texts, which describe non-human controllers, were rediscovered right around 1945, 1947.
1947, the year of the Roswell incident, the start of the modern UFO era. That's quite a coincidence.
Or perhaps not a coincidence at all. Perhaps the rediscovery of this ancient knowledge was synchronistic, meant to provide a lens to understand what was beginning to manifest more openly.
So who are these controllers, according to the Gnostics? They use the term archon, right?
Correct. Archon means ruler, or more accurately, hidden ruler. In Gnostic cosmology, the archons aren't gods or benevolent guides. They're described as a kind of cosmic error, an anomaly.
An error, like a glitch in the matrix.
Sort of. They're seen as parasitic, non-physical invaders from outside our dimensional reality. Think of them as a psychic virus that can infect consciousness, hijack minds, and warp intentions. They're fundamentally deceivers.
And do the descriptions of these archons match anything from modern UFO lore?
Strikingly so. The Gnostic texts describe the archons appearing in two main forms. One is distinctly reptilian, which obviously connects to countless modern accounts and theories about reptilian entities, sometimes linked to the Draco star system.
Okay. And the other form?
The other form described is eerily similar to the modern archetype of the gray alien, resembling a gray fetus with big black eyes. So these ancient texts, hidden for centuries, describe the two main types of entities reported in modern abduction and contact cases.
That's chilling. So these archons, this psychic virus, how do they operate? How do they control things if they're non-physical?
This is where Gnostic cosmology gets really radical. They believe that the physical universe we experience isn't the true ultimate reality, which they called the pleroma, a realm of pure spirit.
Or universes.
A kind of counterfeit, a fake reality, a bad copy of the original reality. Some might even use the modern term simulation.
A simulation. Created by?
Created by the chief archon, the Lord Archon, often called the Demiurge. This figure, the craftsman of the material world, is seen by Gnostics not as the true ultimate god, but as an arrogant, flawed, and often ignorant lesser power. They often identify this Demiurge with the vengeful, controlling god depicted in parts of the Old Testament.
Wow. Okay, so the universe itself is a flawed copy, maybe a trap, created by these archons. That's a heavy concept. How do they use this fake reality to control us?
Through a concept the Gnostics called phantasia. It means illusion, hallucination, the ability to create false realities that the target believes is real. They use this power of illusion to manipulate perception and maintain control.
Control over whom?
Especially those in positions of power. The texts say they infiltrate the psyches of human leaders, kings, and politicians, guiding them towards actions that create chaos, division, and suffering within the simulation. The goal is to keep humanity trapped and fighting amongst itself.
Why? What's the point? What do they get out of it if they're not physical?
Energy. Sustenance. The Gnostics believed the archons lack the genuine divine spark, the creative energy of the true source. They are fundamentally parasitic.
Parasitic. They feed on us.
They feed on our emotions, specifically negative emotions. The texts describe them consuming the miasma of sorrow, grief, rage, and pain, and hatred. Human suffering isn't just a byproduct of their interference, it's the intended output. It's their food source.
So war, hatred, fear. That's literally archon food. The structure of our conflict-ridden history is essentially a farm.
That's the horrifying implication of the Gnostic worldview. To ensure a steady supply of this negative emotional energy, they claimed the archons infused humanity with what they called a counterfeit spirit.
A counterfeit spirit. What does that mean?
It means implanting tendencies towards ego, selfishness, materialism, division, violence, all the things that generate the negative emotions they feed on. Our society, according to this view, is specifically designed to make us feed the counterfeit spirit. It's a system optimized for emotional harvesting.
And they're afraid of us waking up to this.
Terrified. Because if humanity achieves gnosis, true self-knowledge, spiritual awareness, connection to the real source, and overcomes the counterfeit spirit, their food supply dries up. The whole control system collapses.
Okay, let's connect this back to the present day, the UFOs, the cover-up. The sources suggest that these negative entities, maybe the Greys as manifestations of the archons, have used technology to back humanity into a corner.
Yes, the idea presented is that renegade factions, like certain gray groups heavily influenced by this archontic agenda, have manipulated world governments, particularly superpowers, into a state of checkmate.
Checkmate how?
Through vastly superior technology, the kind of tech that might explain the moon anomalies, the impossible maneuvers of UFOs, governments realize they can literally do nothing about the fact that they're here. They can't fight them, they can't control them.
So the cover-up isn't just about preventing panic, it's about hiding governmental impotence.
That's part of the theory. Fear and helplessness, not necessarily just malice, drive the secrecy. They're trapped.
This whole situation is described then not just as an alien encounter, but as a cosmic war for consciousness.
Exactly. The implication is profound. Humanity hasn't truly been free. The sources suggest that for the past 5,700 years or so, our history, our development, our very choices have been subtly manipulated. We have not had the opportunity to genuinely use our own free will because we've been operating within the confines of this archontic fantasia.
And because our own governments are paralyzed, powerless in this checkmate situation, intervention comes from elsewhere.
That's the claim in some of these sources, that benevolent groups like the entities allegedly from the Andromeda system have stepped in. They see Earth as being illegitimately interfered with by these parasitic forces, violating some kind of cosmic law. They're intervening to set things straight because humanity, trapped within the illusion and technologically outmatched, can't do it alone.
It's an incredible, almost overwhelming narrative. From strange lights and bell ringing on the moon to airbrushed photos and scrapped military bases, all potentially explained by an ancient Gnostic warning about parasitic psychic rulers creating a fake reality to feed on our suffering.
It certainly ties a lot of disparate threads together, however disturbing the final picture is.
Okay, let's try to summarize the key takeaways for you listening. First, the moon itself. It shows clear anomalies, seismic, visual, auditory, that defy standard scientific explanations. That ringing, it strongly points to something non-natural.
Second, there's significant evidence and testimony suggesting a massive long-term government cover-up. This wasn't just classifying data. It involved actively altering records like airbrushing photos, intimidating witnesses with violence, and shelving crucial strategic projects like Project Horizon, possibly due to an existing superior presence.
And third, the ancient Gnostic texts offer a potential why. They describe these archons, these hidden rulers resembling reptilians and greys, who create a kind of simulated reality, a fantasia, to manipulate humanity and feed off our negative emotions. This puts the entire cover-up in a much larger cosmic context.
It paints a picture of a struggle far beyond geopolitics.
So, here's the final thought we want to leave you with. If the physical evidence of huge non-human structures on the moon was suppressed so ruthlessly, and if these ancient texts are even partially right, that the reality we perceive might be a carefully crafted fantasia designed by non-human entities to control and feed off us,
then the question becomes deeply personal.
how much of your daily life, your thoughts, your emotions, your choices, how much of it is genuinely your free will? And how much might just be the most sophisticated, most invisible form of control imaginable? What decisions did you make today that were truly yours?
Something to ponder.
M5D UFO files sensationalized mysteries discussed by those who dare to question. The truth is out there and we seek it. Don't forget to like, share, and join the truth seekers only on M5D. Hashtag M5D UFO files. Rate and review us. It helps other seekers find our content.
M5D UFO Files. Unraveling the UFO Files. Revelations that change everything.